Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Lunch and Learn webinar session, where we are serving you bite-sized insights on an easy-to-digest form. This is the second part in our series after a successful first part in November last year. And based on the very warm and good feedback we got, we decided that we should do another one and dive deep into something which seemed to create a lot of interest in the first webinar. I hope you're somewhere in a nice place where you can relax for a moment, and hopefully we will be able to give you some food for thought. Maybe you have a nice, enjoyable lunch there at the same time. My name is Markus Kalela. I'm the Senior Customer Success Manager at Enfuce. I've been working for a decade in the fuel industry with fuel cards prior to joining Enfuce. And fuel cards, fleet and mobility, and payments, they are my passion, and happy to be able to work with that topic here at Enfuce. Still get excited about this topic. And like I said in the previous webinar, I think times have never been as interesting in this sector as they are now. At first, just a few short words about Enfuce and who we are and what we do. Enfuce was founded in 2016, and we built on a winning combo of world-leading tech, compliance knowledge, and the brightest minds in payment processing and card issuance. We were the first one to bring the payment processing in a public cloud, and nowadays we are an e-money institution regulated by the Finnish FSA and a principal member to the schemes. We have millions of card holders globally, and what we pride ourselves with is our industry-leading NPS customer satisfaction score. We have a strong funding from investors, and that fosters our stability and sustainable growth even in these unpredictable times. We are your modern, modular, cloud-based, reliable, and trustworthy issuing processing partner. And what we do is we can be your one-stop shop for card issuing and payment processing. With our composable offering, we can support open or closed-loop networks. We can give you the full control of where the card can be used and what can be bought. We have a diverse portfolio of different card products supported, including prepaid, charge and credit card setups for both consumers and businesses. That allows you to create a great customer experience by offering your customers feature-rich card products powered by our flexible APIs, our white label mobile app, and such, which can create a fully digital user experience. We bring the brightest minds, so our experience and experts can support you throughout the whole process and customer journey in creating and maintaining a successful card program. In case you would be bringing your existing portfolio, we can support you with a smooth and seamless data migration. And as the foundation, there's the state-of-the-art tech and tools. So a cloud-based, scalable, secure infrastructure, which is compliant with the latest regulation and certified as the first one in Europe for Visa Fleet 2.0 PIN. Very shortly, as a background, who we are and why are we here discussing about this topic. But when I'm saying we, I don't mean just myself, but I have the privilege of having Richard Campion from Visa joining me today in discussing the topic. Richard, would you be willing to say a few words about yourself and who you're representing?
Certainly. Hi, Markus, and hi, everyone on the line as well. I'm Richard Campion. It's a real privilege to be here today, along with the team from Enfuce. I've been with Visa now for 6 years, and as part of that journey, I've spent time on both the acquiring and acceptance side, and now more recently as our head of fleet and mobility. I think very similar to you, Markus, the mobility space is a real passion of mine. In my previous job on the acceptance side, I was very heavily involved in a lot of our Visa's urban mobility efforts. And working very closely with a number of transit operators. And interestingly, I'm sat above Paddington Station looking down at all of the trains there, and the ability to change that customer experience, the ability to enable tap and pay on transit networks with all of the security and the infrastructure that sits behind that has been a key part of what we're doing. And as I say, about 7 months ago now, I moved into this position as head of fleet and mobility, and working very closely with Enfuce. It's been fantastic to see some of the changes across this industry, and very excited to see where we can take it within the future. If I cover a bit about what Visa is, I think people typically know Visa as a payment network. Our mantra is very much to uplift everyone everywhere, being the best way to pay and be paid. Visa is active in over 200 countries with in excess of 100 million merchants across the network, and processing a huge number of transactions on a daily basis. We're also the most trusted financial institution in the world. But I think more than that, and more than just being a network, much of what we do is to enable the ecosystem across the four-party model. So across merchants, acquirers, issuers, and card holders as well. As I've mentioned already, Visa was very much involved in the rollout of contactless solutions. I think something now that 90% of face-to-face transactions that we see across Europe are now enabled by contactless. We've been heavily involved in a number of different industry programs, I think mass transit being a key one. Behind the scenes, there's a huge amount that Visa does around utilizing our fraud and AI capabilities in order to make sure that people are transacting in a secure and safe manner. We've also been front and center of responding to a lot of the regulatory requirements. Take strong customer authentication as one of the examples of that. I think I often say that some of the best payment experiences are those that are entirely forgettable, that happen in the background. Take Uber as an example, whilst also making sure that the actual payment experience is completely safe. And I think that that is the kind of solution where we want to get to within the fleet and mobility segment.
Great, thank you for the introduction, and really exciting to be together in this session. So what me and Richard together are hoping we can achieve is a relaxed discussion on a really interesting topic on how the industry is changing and what can we do to actually make that transformation a beneficial transformation for all of us. And to get started, a few words still about the practicalities. So throughout this webinar, you can post your questions, comments on the form on the right-hand side of the webinar view, and we will answer as many as we can in the end of the webinar. Don't be afraid. The questions will be only shown to us, the organizers, and the other participants cannot see who has been asking or commenting what. In case we couldn't address all the questions during this time, we will then make sure that we can address them after the webinar and send you the answers then later on. We also have 2 polls during this webinar, so we want to get some insight from you, how you see the world and this topic in general. So with that said, let's jump in. And if we think about the world of fleet and mobility, it's clear that the world is changing, and the payment use cases for traditional fuel cards or fleet cards, it's expanding the use cases and what the customers are expecting. We all have seen how much there is discussion about EV charging and how the payment of EV charging is different compared to what we have used to with, for example, paying for fuel. There's the new ways of mobility. We have been talking a lot about micro mobility. We still need to park the car somewhere and pay for the car parking. There might be road tolls, bridge tolls that need to be paid for, and more other expenses that you have to deal with during your workday or on your free time. And what we also see in the industry is that there are new players who are bringing in new types of business models as well, how to combine these different aspects of mobility and how to serve the customers in new ways. We know that for fuel payments in Europe, traditionally that has been dominated quite heavily by closed-loop fuel cards, cash, ordinary debit and credit cards. But in our previous Lunch and Learn webinar, we took a look at the modern fleet and mobility card and what kind of new requirements the issuers are facing. And we could see that the requirements are quite high. Richard, how have you seen these kind of new use cases and the new requirements from the customers impacting the issuers and how you at Visa see this?
I think one of the most interesting pieces here is that all of us are we're both consumers and we also travel for business as well, and some of them on the line may also be drivers as part of that too. And I think we're seeing a bigger disparity between the payment solutions that we have as consumers. So in-app payments, right? I have all of my cards now are in Google, Apple Pay, etc. I have a wide variety of areas where I can utilize those cards. And I think what I'm increasingly looking for as I guess a business traveler is to be able to use those exact same solutions that I have on the consumer side when I'm traveling for business as well. And then when I look at the list that you've got here, I think it's even broader than this. Vehicle servicing, I think, is becoming a key one. Vehicle sundries alongside that, and also just ad hoc emergency expenses as well. I think when you are traveling, you never know what kind of unforeseen circumstances you're going to face. So to have that flexibility, I think, is key.
Great. In our previous webinar, I mentioned Visa Fleet 2.0 quite briefly as a new topic. And I said that I believe that's one of the transformative initiatives shaping the fleet and mobility sector. That created a lot of interest, but also many questions. And that was one of the driving forces to setting up this webinar and having an opportunity to dive deeper into what Visa Fleet 2.0 actually is. So, Richard, could you give us a little bit more insight into this topic? What are we talking about when we talk about Visa Fleet 2.0 and why did Visa come up with something like this?
Yeah, certainly, Markus. I think if we go on to the next page there, it's important to start to understand exactly what the point of departure is today. And we know within Visa how difficult it is to stand up a network, to stand up a network which is operational to 5 nines, that has all of the security processes, can take new cards onto the network and close them down afterwards, etc. So it's not lost, I think, on any of us, just how sort of powerful the existing fuel cards and the networks that are built on are. And on the left-hand side of this page, you can start to see the elements which are operational within the closed-loop cards today. These are cards that can separate the amount that you see from an authorization perspective, to what is settled at the back end, so that discounts, which are crucial, can be applied throughout that. Typically, they're limited to a particular network of either fuel stations or a limited network of spending. They also provide a huge amount of information, over and above what is typically available on a card transaction, insights into data, reporting on fuel expenses. In some cases, they can be used for additional spend. We've got the example of tolls here as well, but typically access to that additional network is limited. Crucially, I think they can also provide VAT information, and then they offer a level of card security on top of that. So that is, if you like, I think the point of departure from a closed-loop fuel card perspective. Then on the right-hand side here, and I think, Markus, this alludes to the points that you were making up front around what customers are demanding today, and really some of what I was saying around how can you take the same customer experience that we're all used to as consumers and deploy that in a commercial environment. So again, the support for fuel and non-fuel expenses, I think all of those items that you had on the previous page, with the right spend controls in place, we should be able to unlock on one card. Some of the research that we've done suggests that the average driver is carrying 2.3 cards on average with them. And part of the reason for that is just given the access to the network. Spend controls, again, you've already mentioned this, but spend controls either by spend category, is it EV, is it fuel? Spend controls all the way down to a product level, is it a Mars bar, is it a bottle of whiskey, is it premium fuel, is it basic fuel? All of those elements are vital, and we can offer that level of spend controls now on an open loop card. The expense management and reporting piece, I'll come on to on the next slide around some of the enhanced data elements that we're capturing. The next element on here around the mobility budgets, I think this has been a key shift in Europe, and I think that we're going to see this gather momentum in the near future. A lot of governments at a national level are looking to migrate towards mobility budgets, really to encourage particularly travellers within cities to travel more sustainably. So again, I think how does payments fit into that? Well, having a payment vehicle or having a payment card that you can use for both your fuel expenses, but also to travel on the transit network, also to utilise micro-mobility, to utilise ride sharing, wherever it takes us, that flexibility is also important. On the right-hand side there, EV support, I think, that's key. So many fleets today are mixed fuel, and again, catering for those needs is vital. Increasingly, I think we're all moving towards digital solutions, but this isn't just about having your payment card within your XPay. It's also from an onboarding perspective, having the flexibility to, if a new driver comes on board, push them a virtual card so they can start utilizing it as soon as possible, and you're not having to wait for that physical card to arrive. And then I think the next couple of elements I'll treat together, both security and regulatory wise. A lot of the closed loop cards are still on the magstripe technology. Whilst I think that, that was fine, I think in the past, we're now moving today towards EMV, contactless, and the levels of security and the enhanced levels of security that can be offered on those. And similarly, from a regulatory perspective, making sure that the payment card that you're using is obviously regulatory compliant. That's key as we think about enabling all of these other use cases. So I think that gives a snapshot in terms of the point of departure, and then also what some of the customer needs are going forwards. If we move on to the next page, this is really where Visa Fleet 2.0 came in. And what we did, and this is probably going back 2-3 years now, it was initially launched in the US, live in South Africa, and live in Europe now as well. This was really Visa's solution to make sure that we are meeting those needs that we alluded to on the previous page. So again, to try and bring some of this to life, on the left-hand side there, the element around chip enhancements. What we've been very busy doing in the background is opening up the VisaNet system so that we can accommodate more of the information which is required on a fuel card. That enhanced data, I typically discuss this in 3 different ways. So the first element of enhanced data, and again, these are all the fields which are now open within VisaNet, prompted data. So the ability to capture data around the odometer reading within the vehicle, the employee number or the vehicle ID, or other fields which are really required by the fleets in order to manage where the fleet is. The second element would be around some of the product codes. So you'll see down the bottom left there, when we thought about building these Visa Fleet specifications, we built them alongside the existing Connexus and IFSF codes to make sure that these are codes, or these are standards which the industry is already aware of. So we're not sort of reinventing the wheel, so to speak, here. And then the third element is VAT data. I don't think we need to underestimate the importance of VAT element, both from a compliance perspective, but also crucially for the fleets to be able to reclaim that VAT.
Yep.
Now,
I guess these have been the things that you've used to hearing when talking with especially those issuers who have their closed loop programs, and when you talk about the potential of an open loop card, I guess these are typically the ones that come up in the discussion what are we going to do with the prompting, or how do we deal with the VAT invoices, etc. So really important parts for someone who has that existing closed loop program and thinking about the potential of doing something new.
100%. And I think the way that I typically look at the enhanced data element is almost a foundational factor. And if you want to take advantage of all of the other aspects that we saw on the previous slide, the EV charging, the mobility budgets, etc., you need to have that foundational element in place. Just to cover on the rest of the points here, you can't have the data piece without a data quality program that goes alongside it. So again, we've resourced that aspect to make sure that the data which is going to be flowing from the merchant through to the issuer is of a good standard. And then as we look to offer up these new opportunities, the tokenization piece. So for those who aren't aware on the call, tokenization essentially means almost encrypting your 16-digit card number that you're used to seeing on your card into a different format, which then goes either into your Google or Apple wallet, but can also then be stored within your watch, could also be stored within your vehicle as well. And then the final piece on the right, I think the business case as part of this is going to be key, right? And if we're going to unlock all of those benefits from an open loop side, we needed to make sure that we had the business case in the correct place. So we evaluated this with all of the stakeholders across the ecosystem. And what Visa did was, if that level 3 data or if that enhanced data is flowed as part of the transaction, then Visa will flow a 30 basis point incentive as part of that. And this is just a caveat. This is just on fuel MCCs and EV charging, merchant category codes.
Great. There's already many points which I have had to face when discussing with our customers and with prospective customers, one of them being the digital user experience. And I think that's one of the end customer needs that we are very, very much seeing, especially with the old fuel card products, how to enable the digital user experience, how to get the cards in the digital wallets. So really happy to see that the tokenization being brought up here. And I'm also intrigued of that notion you have there, open loop, but also closed loop. Could you elaborate on that?
Yeah, certainly. I think I go back to that piece around sort of having that foundational layer in place, and the enhanced data and also the fuel discounting piece as well. Those to me, that are two core bits of functionality that are in place on closed loop today. And we need to make sure that we can offer the same sort of economic model and the same level of enhanced data, which ultimately all of the fleets are utilizing to manage the total cost of ownership of the fleet. We need to make sure that that's in place in order to unlock the benefits of the open loop functionality.
Yeah. When we talk about open loop and you also have closed loop here, one tricky question I sometimes get is a question about hybrid loop. I don't know if there is a real definition for a hybrid loop, but have you ever stumbled upon this question or term when you're discussing with your customers, and what would be your answer to that? Is Visa Fleet a hybrid solution?
It's a good question. Look, I think the word hybrid gets used interchangeably and in a number of different ways. The key for me is making sure that we have a solution in place that can meet the needs of probably the merchants, the drivers, and the fleet operators. Those are probably the three core groups that we thought about when we were building this solution. Now, whether that comes in a hybrid solution in the way that we have mapped out here, where we're flowing data, enabling discounting, but also offering a card that can be tokenized and used in mobility. I guess that's one definition of hybrid. I know it's also used in the way of having two account numbers essentially on the same card. Yeah, that's another element of functionality. But I think the starting point, rather than hybrid, the starting point should be what driver experience are we looking to enable, and how does that meet the needs of merchants, drivers, and fleet operators?
Yeah, your last point is very, very important, and that's something I think is a key to the discussion. The level of control on how widely should the card be accepted. I know the universal acceptance of a Visa card enables so many opportunities, but then we also know that there are those use cases where the fleet manager has to have some control in also setting up restrictions. Great.
Completely, yeah. And just to go into a bit more detail on the spend controls, and I guess this is front and center for Enfuce, but you could do it at a merchant category level. You could do it at a maximum transaction size level. You could put spend controls in place based on enable Monday to Friday 9 to 5, but then lock the cards outside of those hours. So there's many different ways that you can enable spend controls, to make sure that the product is being used in the way that it should be used.
Exactly. So opening possibilities, but also bringing more possibilities in controlling how and where and when. Moving on a little bit, I know that electrification is a hot topic. I don't think anything related to transportation has been discussed as widely lately as this topic. And if you have ever driven an EV, I'm sure you know how many apps and tags and all of that are involved in getting your vehicle charged in the various charging points. Fuel retailers are thinking, what kind of a role should they have in the charging business, and how can they stay relevant for their customers when the market is changing and fragmenting? I know some of them are already entering the business, but I still believe most of them are struggling to really truly integrate the charging payment experience into the overall customer experience. I'm sure, Richard, you have been in many such discussions, and I would really like to hear your point of view on what the electrification means for payments, and is there an angle with Visa Fleet on this topic?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think one of the key elements is going to be, what is the pace of change here? And I would never want to put my finger on exactly the number of EVs across consumer and fleets in 5 years' time, whatever it looks like. The transition is taking place. But that said, I think there is still going to be a huge demand for fossil fuels for very much the foreseeable future. So when we thought about the Fleet 2.0 standards, the first piece we did was to understand what is happening from an EV perspective today. And a big one that came across in the research that we did was that payment remains an obstacle to EV adoption. And so I think all of us within the payments industry, we need to make sure that we're doing our bit to try and take the pain away from that aspect. And then I think the other piece when we were thinking about the Fleet 2.0 standards was that when I spoke around those merchant category codes, we built this to future-proof the different fuels that people are taking in the future. So we have the solution in here as well for kilowatts and EV. We've also future-proofed it for hydrogen as well, because we just don't know what is going to happen. But I think the other aspect here is going to be what's the role of the forecourt going forwards? And I think that's still going to be there, perhaps in a slightly different format, but it's still going to be there for the foreseeable.
Yeah, definitely. I'm an EV driver at the moment, and I definitely see myself utilizing the services at the station, maybe even more than I used to before. And I think that's a really interesting aspect to be considered by the service stations. Like, what is the way they will be serving their customers going forward, and maybe also an angle that should be taken into account when thinking about the development of the payment card and what kind of new opportunities it can bring in the business? So how do you see the shift from fleet to mobility and the impact on B2B payments?
Certainly. And there's a number of stats that we've got on the pages here. And this was a piece of research that we did with fleet operators directly. Really interesting. 24% of companies expect their next company car to be diesel or petrol. Obviously that's at the lighter end of the fleet space. In the middle kind of donut there, we were talking about mobility budgets earlier on, and we've seen a number of employers recently, move away from a company car budget and towards a mobility budget, which obviously can still be used for company car purposes, but also gives people the flexibility to travel by other means. And then, the middle one there, 73% plan to transition to electric, hybrid, hydrogen cell vehicles within 5 years. I think this is the big unknown, but we're seeing a huge amount of momentum go into that way. EV drivers as a percentage of fleets in 5 years, 55% with a huge amount of growth on that journey. I think the key piece when it comes to payments is really about having that solution that caters for all fuel types.
Yes, definitely. And especially the market being quite fragmented at the moment. You tend to have quite stable fuel retail networks, but then when it comes to charging, there's a lot of operators with everyone having a bit of their own setup, and to have a payment card which would allow you to, or the card holder to basically survive with one card, one instrument to tackle the payments they need to, that has been quite a struggle, I would say. So how would you see with a Visa Fleet based product, how could one address this?
Definitely. I think, look, the across the AFA regulation and the OZEV guidance as well, both of those I think were a massive step forward in order to address some of the challenges from a payment perspective. Within Visa, we've invested a huge amount to get contactless card readers, so giving people the option to use the exact same card, either the physical card or the virtual card that they're already using in the rest of their day-to-day lives to pay for an EV charge. So we've worked with a number of both charge point operators and terminal hardware providers in order to enable that functionality. The other element that I think is going to be very interesting going forwards, because I'm aware that there is a cost of deploying the hardware. So if we can be smarter about that as an industry, having one payment terminal that can serve 8 different chargers, for instance, I think, again, that will become sort of the norm going forwards.
Right. Interesting. In our previous webinar, we asked the attendees what their customers want, and it was very clear that the end users, what they want is convenience. And what convenience meant for them was, first of all, digital wallets, like you said, being able to do the payments with the mobile phone, with the smartwatch, and virtual cards enabling very speedy onboarding, and also can be then put on the digital wallet without having to wait for the physical card. And then the all-in-one card, so the concept of having one instrument to rule them all. But now, today, we have a question to you in the audience. So now, hearing about what Visa Fleet 2.0 actually means, we would be really keen to hear your views on what of those features would be most interesting to you in your business and maybe as a foundation to your business case going forward. So please take a moment to see the different options and let us know what do you think would be the most interesting for you.
Am I allowed to answer this as well, Markus?
Please. right. So it looks like we have the results in, and we have a clear winner, universal acceptance. And I guess this must be something that is nice to see for you, Richard, as well. Very much what we have come to expect when we think about a Visa card, something you can use wherever, whenever, for whatever you need to pay for. On the second place, we have availability of receipt line item details. And probably no surprise after thinking about the background of where fuel cards are coming from and what have been some of the central functionalities of a fuel card. Then we also have the flexible spend controls. And I guess that's something which, when I reflect back to the discussions I've been having with the customers, I would say that the spend control is the part that you take for granted. But then the first word, the flexible spend controls, is something that many of the issuers are not used to having. Richard, how would you comment on the flexibility of the spend controls? And I think there is something quite central also in the Visa Fleet 2.0, which caters for this need of having the flexibility on first defining how a card should be working, but then also having the availability to adjust as changes as requirements are changing.
I think the spend controls are, I'm surprised if anything it's not higher. And the key piece here is I think that different vehicles and different drivers operate in different ways. And so, this is not a one set of spend controls is going to be relevant for everyone. I expect different fleets and potentially even down to a driver level will offer different spend controls as relevant.
Yep. And I can see that we also have the integrations to expense management tools quite high in the results. Expense management, I think, is an interesting topic. Many players who are really focusing on this expense management as a capability, but more and more of the traditional fuel card issuers and maybe other financial institutions are eyeing on that direction, on bringing more visibility and control on corporations regarding their expenses. And maybe here, Richard, I would like to hear your point of view on how do you see the players who will be in the fleet and mobility payment card sector going forward? Will it be the same fuel card issuers we have come to know, or do you see new kind of players entering this market?
I think as I go back to the point around the use of fossil fuel, it's not going anywhere. And so I think, the leading brands that are there today, I think obviously, they're still going to be the same ones tomorrow. I think there will be, new entrants into this space. And I think the new entrants are going to come from a couple of different areas. I think some of the charge point operators and some of the mobility service providers who, let's be honest, they're smaller today, but, are generating a huge amount of momentum. I think, they're also starting to look at the fleet space. And then I also think that some of the lease companies as well are also looking at payments and payments as a way to drive loyalty, but payments also as a way to have that regular touch point with the customer.
Interesting. Then I think it's time to move on to the last part of the webinar, which is titled Business Case. But I think many of the attendees are thinking, what does it take in practice to consider and then start to execute on issuing Visa Fleet 2.0? And probably many of them are also thinking, how do I build a business case for that kind of a transition, or maybe introducing a completely new product? So keen to hear, Richard, how would you start constructing such a business case, and what things would you take into consideration?
Yeah, certainly. Look, the business case, I think, is fundamental here, and there's a number of different factors on the page, but I won't cover this in detail. As I said up front, what we've done is look across the ecosystem and the different actors that are involved today, all the way from the merchant, the retailer at one side, through to the driver and the fleet operator at the other side, and make sure that as much as possible we are matching the economic models that are in place today. So to drill down on that into slightly more detail, and I'm also looking at some of the questions that are coming, so let me try and allude to that as well. The discounting functionality, and I know across the fuel industry today that discounting is managed in so many different ways. I was amazed when I looked at some of the complexity of these models, but whether it's pump price minus, whether it's cost price, whether it's best of both, what that essentially involves is that the price which is seen at the pump is obviously not the price which the fuel card issuer is paying, and then is probably a different price to what the fuel card operator, the fleet operator is paying. And so we've developed a mechanism to make sure that as much as possible those discounts can also flow through, because I'm conscious that's a huge part of the economic model in terms of the way that closed loop fuel cards are working today. I think the other aspect in terms of spend controls, and again alluding to some of the questions here, the way that we've built the Visa Fleet 2.0 specs is based on the Connexus product codes. So we can flow through up to 8 of those different product codes, which can then be used as part of the authorization decision. So again, as I was saying before, allow premium fuel, allow basic fuel to be purchased, but not premium fuel. Allow the fuel to be purchased, but not the bottle of whiskey, for instance. So again, we can manage those spend controls, right down to a product level, providing it is within those fuel merchant category codes. What I would say on the business case is it's an incredibly complex piece of work, and we've worked with a number of different fuel card providers in order to go into detail about that.
Good. Now that you touched upon the topic of the line items and the restrictions, I see there has been several questions around how do you actually facilitate the delivery of that data? So how does it become available to the issuer and in the merchant on the POS? So how does it work actually?
Yeah, sorry, good question, and probably something we should have covered earlier on. The data is being captured today, and this is where I think what has been built under some of the closed loop infrastructure, is fantastic. And so we're looking to replicate first of all some of the prompted data, which is at the point of sale. So entering that odometer reading, entering that vehicle ID, for instance. I think we're also looking to future-proof that, and what's the role of telematics within that process. You've also got some of the Connexus product codes. So again, that's being captured at the point of sale today. We'll use the same functionality to pass that through the acquirers, through Visa to the issuer, so that they can make the authorization decision based on that. So those I would say are the real-time elements. And then as part of the clearing message, which will occur a couple of days later, we can also then capture the VAT information. From an EV charging perspective, clearly there's no way to or it's very, very difficult to prompt for vehicle ID at an EV charge point. So that element wouldn't be there, but all of the other aspects would take place in EV.
Great. So we have the standard rails, but we have additions which cater for these requirements that the fuel card issuers have come to expect.
Precisely.
Great. I think we are getting close to the end of our webinar, and we are going a little bit over time. We have a few questions, I believe, there still. Can we, Richard, still handle one or two of the questions?
Yeah, sure. Which ones do you want to cover?
Yes. So let's have a look. There is the...
So I see there's a question here around interchange rates.
Yes.
The interchange rates are published widely. The interchange rate for a card present transaction on the fleet, if it's a fleet card, is 1.55%. Please go online, don't fully quote me on that. And if it's an online transaction, I think it is 1.8%. But interchange rates are all publicly available.
Great. Good. And now looking at the other questions, I think we have already touched upon the majority of the questions during your presentation. And like I promised in the beginning, we will still go through all of the questions and see if there's something which we didn't address, and then we'll do our best to address those after the webinar. Richard, it has been a pleasure. Thank you so much for getting on this webinar together with us. I think it is a truly inspiring time, and really the Visa Fleet 2.0 being something of a transformative initiative within this sector. And at Enfuce, we feel honored to be working together with you on this and seeing some of the very first programs going live hopefully soon. And looking forward to upcoming questions and answers also on this topic in various other channels. So I'm sure both Richard and myself, we are happy to continue any discussions also in LinkedIn or face-to-face, wherever we can meet. But once again, Richard, a warm thank you for participation, and a warm thank you to all the attendees for coming over and joining the webinar.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Bye-bye, everyone.